What is up, ladies and gentlemen of the internet? My name is Scyushi and we are back in small and today we're going to be highlighting the patch notes that are currently on the test server. Now keep in mind that these patches are subject to change, like a lot of the stuff in the patch notes could end up changing. I am going to have a video that will focus on the two new professions, but those will be independent of one another, which once again, those can end up changing as well. This is so that we can go through the entirety of the patch. I'm not going to read everything in here verbatim because otherwise we'll be here all day. I kind of just want to give you guys the bullet points as well as I am going to go into detail with each of these. It's just I want to have them all like categorized a little bit better because of course we'll have the patch notes read in more detail when it ends up going to the live server. Now, for those of you that don't know, this is on the test server and essentially the summary of the update is it doesn't have a new class and it doesn't add anything meaningful to the game, you know, as you would expect with everything coming out for Trove this entire year. It does add two new professions, so similar to gardening, ring crafting, there's two new ones coming. They don't impact the game in any meaningful way versus the other professions. I'm not necessarily saying that they're bad professions, it's just the way that they're implemented is kind of weird. So anyways, let's get on with it. So the update is called Punches and Potions, and the developers say, we wanted to give players a long requested feature, a way for players to view their active effects, see longer descriptions and more accurate durations, which I haven't really seen any of that other, you know, on the main HUD area. It's all hidden in this little menu, which means that hopefully a lot of our UI mods will end up updating. I don't know why they just keep packing so many things onto this godforsaken game's UI, but whatever. I mean, that's just something that I'm a stickler for. I don't really like a cluttered UI, and I miss the old days of Trove when the UI was very clean and to the point. So they additionally wanted to give players new ways to control their effects with the addition of some new effect-giving consumables throughout the trade skills of Mysticism and martial arts. These are the two new professions. Please note that as per usual, there's still a fair amount of construction and sawdust, so many of the UI icons are not quite the right size or maybe placeholder art for some recipe stuff. So one of the things that a lot of people were noticing on the test server was that this icon in the top left is huge. I actually kind of like that because it means that I can actually tell what the icon is, because otherwise they're normally microscopic. But anyways, let's move to the next section. So they're talking about the effects viewer, which is what we see right here. So the effect viewer UI is a new way that Trovians can view and learn about the many effects that might be on them at any given time. The effects viewer will show something, usually an ability or a spell, that is modifying the character for a limited amount of time. So for example, the Knight's Iron Will, his ultimate ability would show up in the effects UI. So if I end up using my ult, does that show up in the UI? No, it doesn't. Okay, so they already didn't entirely go full force with it, but I mean, I guess they didn't really need to, even though that's kind of weird. Anyways, players can access the effects UI by clicking the effects menu button right here. Players can scroll through all of their active effects, seeing the names of descriptions along with the remaining durations where applicable. Now, on the test server, you never have patron active, so I wonder whether or not all of the patron effects that are here are going to end up showing up in the effects UI, and is it going to end up saying where the effect is from? Right? Like, I'm not exactly sure. And I also noticed that there is removable effects. So that's kind of interesting that there is an option to remove an effect. I don't know why you would ever want to do that. Let's actually swap over to the Knight. This UI element doesn't go away when I move around, so that's a little bit weird versus everything else in the game. So let's swap our potions. Let's see if we can put our ult on and will it adjust in real time? And then on top of that, will I be able to remove it? So it does show up, shows the duration in real time. That's really nice. And I can remove it at any time. I don't know why you would ever want to do that. And that seems a little bit clunky that you would have to go into this sub menu just to do that. But okay, whatever. If this submenu could show up here or something like that, and it would be something that I could toggle on or off, and then, you know, just hold Alt and use my mouse to click over here and change the ability anytime that I wanted or something like that. I don't know. I don't know the full extent of the utility of it yet. It's nice to have. I just don't know why it's here. You know, it's kind of like it's not as bad as the taxes update. I was going to say it's like the taxes update, but it isn't really. Again, it's cool. It's just why. Now, if you have an idea why, you can sound off in the comments and let me know, because I'm always curious to hear feedback that is other than my own opinion of it. So we also have the auto use slot, which is right up here. Basically, it is going to end up being the replacement of the food slot. So it still has the exact same functionality, but I guess they wanted to, for logistics sake, change it from food to auto use because of the fact that so many different mechanics related to the professions are going to be the auto use slot now, right? So it makes sense why they're adding it, even though it's kind of weird. So they still say food can't be removed from this slot. Items which are removed through means other than decay can freely be removed from the slot though. So there's going to be some stuff in the, martial arts profession, the mysticism profession, that you can put into this slot that you will actually be able to take off. So it's just going to be something that'll be automatically used, not necessarily consumed like the food items are, where you can put a whole stack and then you can remove all of it. But that last item is still going to end up being here because, of course, it's going to show that this one item is, slowly degrading. So that's why I can't remove it. So before we get into the martial arts, we're going to move into the mysticism. And this is where things are going to get very, very long in the way that it's explained. So let's just get right into it. So mysticism is a new trade skill which allows players to craft limited duration effects by collecting Trovian mana and combining it with magical reagents. Now I have all of the numbers for you guys of how much it's going to cost you to max out the profession, how long that's going to potentially take free to play, and so on and so forth, which we'll get into. But keep in mind again that this is all related to the test server, so some of it may end up changing. So long duration buffs, medium duration buffs, and short duration scrolls are the tools of those who dabble in the mystic arts. Wild Trovian mana can be collected in adventure worlds from 3 different biomes each week. And I'll show you where you can get those for the given week, because these are going to be 3 biomes that will rotate throughout the week. So although the mana pool initially starts at a 1,000 cap, it can eventually be raised to 100,000 through consuming mana maximizers. So how do you end up finding the biome and how do you get mana maximizers? Well, if we go to the crafting table, you'll see right here, bang, bang, boom. That's going to end up being the 1, 2, 3 different biomes for that given week that you'll be able to collect mana out of. And then next week, it would just roll these over into different craftables that you would end up getting, right? And the Trovian mana, as you can see right here, is going to end up being an item that you use to craft these recipes. Now, one thing that is a bit of a concern is not all items are created equal. So if I go over here, you can see this immediately costs 250 of the Trovian mana versus this costing 100. So in order to optimize how quickly you could get through this profession, you essentially are going to craft the items that are the cheapest for your mana because of the limited amount of mana that you have. And if you're free to play, it's going to take a considerable amount of time to get through this entire crafting station and get all the way up to 200 max profession, which we'll get into that in a little bit. More so, let's talk about how do you end up increasing. Well, there's going to be this guy right here, which will sell you a limited amount of mana for that given week. And then he'll also sell you a mana maximizer, which of course is something that is going to end up recycling every week. So that's the time gated free to play aspect of it. But there is also going to end up being pay to win boxes, which I'll have a video highlighting these boxes when the update goes live, because of course I can't test them out on the test server. Now I will say, don't ask me what the gold chest is going to drop, because I assume that's going to end up being over here in the collectibles tab. This is actually something completely separate. But anyways, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's continue on. So Mistena Cull, which is the merchant hiding over here, I guess. Yeah, that's them. Basically, they say that they have a bunch of different items that you can improve your mana pool. So buffs will stay active through world changes, logouts, and will last the remainder of the current day. So when they say the remainder of the current day, they don't mean you apply it and get it for 24 hours. They mean you apply it, and then when daily reset hits, it's gone. They do mention that if you end up applying the buff within the last hour before daily reset, it will actually continue on into the next day. So, I mean, I guess it's better than nothing. So buffs convert mana and reagents into powerful utility effects like Icebound, which allows even non-ice sages the ability to walk confidently on ice without slipping. Who cares? Trovians can only ever have a single buff active at a time, and applying a new one will remove the previous one. This is where you start to see problems and cracks in the armor, because why would you take any of these buffs over food items? Well, we'll get into that. So anyways, moving on, there is also going to end up being potions. So this is going to end up being the mysticism buffs, which these, you know, slowly get more and more as you get up to here, which is stability, firewalking, whatever. I'll go into more detail about all of the different abilities when we have our independent video, but this is going to end up being the potion aspect of the game, which you can see the crystallized mana fragment, by the way, is what you'll get out of these cash shop boxes, so that it's not just going to waste with your 1,000 cap. So you'll basically be able to convert the crystallized ones that you get out of the cash shop into normal mana. So anyways, the potions themselves, you can see, are going to end up giving you different buffs. So every buff has a corresponding potion as well. Potions are more expensive than buffs, but also more convenient. Potions only last for a few hours instead of the entire day until reset, but they will not lose any duration while the player is offline. Potions can be conveniently consumed from the inventory as well. Potions are crafted at the alchemical workbench, but their recipes must be learned first. To learn a potion recipe, here we go. This is where it gets, the explanation for this is kind of bad, but in order to get a potion recipe, a player must be chewing on Almystic's insight in the auto-use slot and have the corresponding buff to the desired potion. So that's what this is. Basically, you have to have this in your auto-use slot, and then you have to have an active buff on you at the same time, as far as I understand. And then you'll be able to craft the corresponding recipe. And I think you have to craft it once, and then it counts as it's unlocked, and then you can get the mastery points. Again, I'll deep dive into this when we have the video dedicated to mysticism. So they also say that Trovians can only ever have a single potion active at a time, and applying a new one will remove the previous one. It doesn't stack with the buffs as well from the mysticism, so GG. The interesting thing is that the potions are tradable though. So anytime a potion is purchased from the player market, one from the stack will automatically be consumed. So this has two benefits, the devs say, which we'll get into. You immediately know the quality of the potion from the bouquet. Okay. But it also allows potion makers to sell a single stack of potions without risking them being flipped. There is a huge problem with this game right now where the developers think that flipping stuff in the market is a bad thing. I haven't heard any players complain about it, but the devs sure as heck seem to think it's a problem. I'm not exactly sure why, but basically they're saying so that you could sell one potion at a time in the shop, and then it would just automatically consume for that player. If we're going to end up going that hard with the potions, how about we go that hard with something that actually matters? Make it so that all of the mounts in the cash shop will automatically be consumed, and then you can't buy them if you already have it unlocked. How about that? Make it so that Gonda, if you buy it on the market, you can't flip it because it'll automatically consume, and the only people that could buy it are people that don't have Gonda unlocked. I don't care if people get mad at that comment. I'm just saying consistency is something that is really detrimentally important to this godforsaken game that the devs seem to always go in half-assed. Anyways, let's get on with it before I get too frustrated. So scrolls are rare and most magical known that modern day mystics can sometimes recover. Okay, whatever. Scrolls are powerful but volatile. Lastly, they last only a short while with effects that do not follow through world changes. Trovians can have many scrolls active at a time. Most Giant Lands buff scrolls do not interact with the mysticism system. The one exception is freedom of flight. So we'll go into a little bit more here. It says that only the gold version of this scroll is still available for purchase. Any still existing versions should mostly function. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Basically, I don't know why they say Giant Lands buff scroll and all of this crap. They're talking about Sundered Uplands. So you know how you get the resist flight or whatever, where you can fly through the Sundered Uplands, and nobody on this Green Earth has ever purchased any of them because of how overpriced they are and how they're just useless. Well, they're basically saying that that buff that you get from those scrolls is not going to dominate over any of the buffs that you get out of here. That's it. Crafting a Mysticism recipe will occasionally trigger an additional reward, similar to how crafting titles occasionally grants an additional title. A Mystic's reagent stash has also been added to the store, allowing players to acquire reagents necessary for their Mystic arts, including both mana maximizers and crystallized trophy and blah, 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 blah. Cash up. It's pay to win so that you can skip past all of it. Now, before we move on, let me just get some rough numbers for you guys. Okay, so in order to max this out, so let's start at from tier 1 to 2. So tier 1 to 2, you need 5,000 mana. Tier 3 to 4, you need 37,500. And then from 4 to 5 or whatever, what are we on? 4 now? Either way, 100,000, 150,000. So in total, you need 292,500 mana in total, which again, you can get it up to a maximum stack of 100,000, but you're not going to be able to do that free to play anytime soon because you're going to have to slowly get these every week. So that's, you know, again, pushing the cash up. Now, free to play, from what I heard from people trying it out on the test server, when you have the mana buff active, it doesn't matter what uber difficulty the world is that you're in, you're going to get 1 to 4 mana per dungeon. Now, assuming that you get the maximum of 4 mana per dungeon, right? Like, let's just say you're super duper lucky every single time. This is being generous. You would have to complete 73,125 dungeons in order to max out this profession. Let's take a quick little gander at my dungeon objectives. I have completed 150,000 dungeons in my total of like 9 years now of playing this video game. And you're saying that you want me to complete about half, if not more than half of that in order to max out this profession free to play? That's also given the fact that you still have to get the mana maximizer. So once again, you can see my problem with this is that it's another parasitic update that doesn't actually end up coinciding with the rest of the game, and it is based off of developer logic, which is psychotic. These developers clearly are steering the content into the cash shop. I get that. I don't fault them for that because it's probably an executive decision from Game Ago where they want to push the cash shop. But the problem that I have with it is the less obtainable the goal is, the less likely people are going to spend money, myself included. You know, the star chart, that was ridiculously expensive, and I didn't end up spending, you know, too much on the star chart stuff because it was like, why would I pay to win something that is essentially going to cost like $400 to max out versus just doing it with my qubits, right? And this is going to be something similar where when this update goes live, I'm going to restrict myself to probably like $100 worth of these Mystic reagents stashes, just so I can show you guys how ridiculous it's going to be. And then we can kind of calculate an average of how much it would physically cost you. Because knowing Trove, in order to max out the profession cash shop, it's probably going to cost like thousands of dollars or something, all in the name of something that gives you garbage buffs like stability increased by 500 and 5%. Why would I take that over light that I get from food? So let's move on. The next part is going to end up being the martial arts profession, which is going to end up being all these different crafting tables up here. So the martial arts trade skill allows players to craft auto consumables, which trigger short and long duration effects based on the abilities and animations they perform. These stances, shouts, and mantras go in the auto use slot of the character sheet. Players can craft mantras, shouts, and stances from the altar of martial artistry workbench to increase their skill in martial arts once they have acquired a karma, blah, 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 blah. So basically, this is going to end up being the karma shrine, which you can see requires quality incense, and the negative karma is going to require candied soul tangle and beginner's incense. So the candied soul tangle is from composting trophies from that specific biome of enemy, all right? And then in order to end up getting the incense, you just buy them from this NPC right here, and you can see they're, you know, they're pretty costly considering how many of them you're going to need in the long run. Now, they kind of imply that the karma system has to be even in order to end up crafting things out of this crafting table. And it sounded kind of interesting where it's like, oh, you have to actually have a balance of the karma. No, you don't, because just consider positive and negative karma to be two independent resources that you just have to farm up as many as you can. So near as I can tell, this doesn't seem to have any pay to win aspect to it. I think players would be way too frustrated if they had 2 new professions added to the game and both of them were pay to win. Now, I'm not saying that they won't end up shoehorning in some pay to win aspect later on. We still don't know what this NPC does on the test server. But near as I can tell, what is going to restrict you from progressing in this skill tree, or not skill tree, but the profession, is the amount of trophies that you have. And more specifically, the amount of trophies that you can use to craft specific negative karma and so on and so forth. At the very least, it does seem to be very open-ended because all of this is negative karma. It just changes the crafting component required for it, which makes me wonder why they actually bothered going the extra mile of making all of these independent trophies loot collect into their own respective item instead of just having one universal item that they would all end up going into. It just doesn't make sense to me, but hey, whatever. Devs are crazy. So anyways, let's move on a little bit further here. So it says that negative karma is much easier to come by just because of the tangled souls and all the stuff that we ended up mentioning about the badges. Let me actually skim through this here because a lot of this is repeating what I said, but at a lengthier explanation of it. So it does say that although they trigger from different abilities or animations, stances, and shouts, both deduct one of their stack each time they are triggered. So essentially they're saying that these are going to end up being a consumable item that you'll have to craft multiple of, not just a buff that you can apply to yourself universally or last throughout the day or whatever. Mantras do not stack. They will provide an effect when triggered, but not consumed. The effect will be removed when the mantra is unequipped. So basically when they say stances, they mean stuff like this, where you can see the passive is that you have to sleep the emote for 10 seconds to increase your health regeneration for 2 hours. You are still going to have this item in your auto use slot, but it's not going to actually consume the stack until you end up actually doing the stance or the sleep emote in this case. They do also mention that the mantras provide players with long-term effects which do not persist through world changes. So if your game crashes, I'm assuming good luck, you just lost, if you get crashed and the game kicks you to the hub or kicks you to a new adventure world because the world you're in died, well, that's not their fault, but you lost it anyways, right? They say also that using the Relic of Preservation workbench with a mantra equip allows a player to convert it to a week-long litany. So that's going to end up being this right here. So this will allow it so that applying a portion of its effect for the remainder of the current week. So I guess it's going to convert the buff that you have into, I don't know, something that lasts the entire week instead of resetting on daily or something like that. I'm not exactly sure yet. Players can only have one litany active at a time. So this is their example, which it's a mouthful. The mantra of regeneration will give you this one right here. Mantra of regeneration gives 2 hours of health regen after using the sleep emote for 10 seconds. The litany of regeneration gives health regeneration, which does persist through world changes and persists until it is either replaced or the week rolls over. So the weekly reset, not your physical week. You don't apply this on Sunday and then be mad that it just went away as soon as it goes to Monday, because that's when weekly reset hits. So shouts, on the other hand, are gonna be stuff like this. They'll end up being consumed and give you various buffs. So shouts grant a short increase in combat effectiveness with a short cooldown. Each time a shout is triggered, it removes one shout from the auto use slot. So for example, the shout Invigorating Roar will trigger and consume every time the player uses a slam ability. So it is available to Fey Trickster, Ice Sage Knight, and Revenant, and usually will be visually, I like how they say usually, implying that it doesn't happen all the time. It'll be represented with a visual effect by the character, which will raise their weapon high above their head with both hands, and the buff in the Invigorating Roar example gives 5 seconds of energy regeneration. I'm assuming the developer that wrote out this example doesn't realize that the Revenant doesn't use energy regen. Okay, so stances are similar to shouts, but more about planning and mastering discipline over mind and body than pure visceral rage, yada, yada, yada. Stances also give short combat effectiveness on short cooldowns. Each time a stance is triggered, it removes one stance from the auto use slot. So for example, with the stances, which is going to be something like this right here, the stance Sharpshooter will trigger and consume if and when a charged shot ability available to Dino Tamer and Gunslinger. I don't know if they, what about Shadowhunter and other characters, but okay. If you end up doing a charge shot for 7 seconds, you will then get 5 minutes of crit hit. So you gotta hold the charge shot for 7 seconds. Okay. Anyway, you'll get crit hit that none of us need because we already have 100% crit hit anyways. This, I think, is all in favor. I could be wrong about this, but the copium in me thinks that this is all in favor of that next big update, which is going to have a huge difficulty spike, which more than likely is going to have enemies that will nerf our stats, because otherwise I don't understand the reason to bother increasing stats and combat effectiveness. Like, even when we ended up getting the star chart, it was cool, and I still really like the star chart. And frankly speaking, I actually like this update too, but it's all in service of something that doesn't matter. And further than that, it's all in service of something that is supposed to replace food, but none of the buffs will give you a significant amount of light that makes them worthwhile, which is what makes me suspect that they're going to have an end game update, which is going to take focus away from light and more so focus on debuffs to your stats, like maybe something that'll knock your crit hit by half, meaning that we would have to have a lot more crit hit percentage in order to compensate. That's all just speculation, though. It is still very strange that this has all been added so soon, considering that this endgame update that we're theorizing about would more than likely hit next year. So then there's also additional updates, and this is fairly short. So they removed invisible entities from the Rally of Heroes club fixture, but the change will only apply to fixtures that are placed or upgraded after the update. So most likely nobody's ever going to do that because it's just too expensive to bother doing that. They moved a bunch of event mounts, allies, boats, and sales and stuff from July 2023 into the event vault category in the collections menu. Fixed an issue preventing 4 miners Trove rare drop titles from dropping. Who cares? Made a small change to existing VFX that should not make any noticeable changes. Then why even mention it? Again, my overall feedback to this update is that I don't dislike it, but it's pointless. And I'll still have videos that are going to highlight the martial arts and the mysticism so that we can go through and, you know, pick apart each of the different buffs. But just trust me when I say that none of them really look that appealing. There is some stuff in the martial arts that looks okay, some stuff that I might actually consider using if it wasn't a consumable item. The fact that it's a consumable item means that I would have to consistently farm for these resources in order to consistently craft this over and over again. But as many of us end gamers are probably already scratching our heads thinking, okay, well, I'm going to end up maxing this out for the mastery and then I'm going to forget about it. Similar to so many other aspects of the game. I mean, even the fishing 2.0, bro, I didn't even bother maxing it out and I already forgot about it just because it's fishing. It's, you know, it doesn't do anything for the gameplay. It's boring. And same with all of this stuff. I think that the mechanics behind this are neat and it's cool that we're getting new professions added to the game, but it's like, why? Especially when they're supposed to be giving us combat buffs. But this is clearly designed by somebody who doesn't regularly play this game, the developers, because all of these combat buffs are useless. Anyways, that's my 2 cents on it. Sound off in the comments what you guys think. I don't want to sway your opinion too much into saying, oh, this is stupid and I hate it. I don't hate it. I just feel it's very strange that they keep dedicating this large amount of time and effort towards these updates when it would probably be a lot simpler and easier for them to just add a new class or add a new biome or add actual content to the game, not stuff that just affects passive numbers. You know what I mean? Like titles and effects menus, like who cares? I don't know. I don't anyways, but if you do, you can let me know. Anyways, I would appreciate if you smash like, sub for more about them, and you want to support the channel, and have a wonderful day, everybody.